There are several occasions when it's really tough not to reply to someone, like when a person has just pushed your buttons. But under stressful, challenging circumstances, it seldom makes much sense to respond or rather react impulsively. What's required is a second or two to ponder on whether your instinctive emotion, if spoken, would make things better or more probably worse. Here are 8 circumstances in which you'd be a lot better off not responding to provocations, despite the evident urge to do so. Number 1. If it would likely insult someone. You may actually care about the individual, or the connection may be very vital to you. So there's no solid reason to risk offending them by being more open about, or adversely critical of, their conduct than they can bear emotionally. Some individuals are compassionate, loyal, and supportive, but also quick to take offense and very reactive to criticism. Other people's rigidity makes it practically hard for them to understand a differing perspective. So it's just dumb to say something that would just distress them and underline the differences between you. If these people say or do anything that concerns you, it's often better to attempt to disregard it and, inwardly, find a means to handle your current problems with them rather than confronting them immediately. Number 2. If it would hurt their feelings. If you want to be courteous, considerate, and compassionate, you won't make an unnecessary comment on another person's, say, hair, even if they expressly want criticism on their appearance. It's only generous to downplay how their hair looks and focus on what about their self-presentation is more becoming. If they end up having a strong self-image, you'll have a lot more latitude to react freely, but at first, it makes sense to contemplate how answering truthfully could affect them. The same rule remains true whether someone has stated anything immature, uninformed, or self-contradictory. Would it just injure the person and your relationship to voice the first things that spring to mind, without first contemplating the negative impact your reaction could have? My suggestion would seem to reflect the platitude: it's better to refrain from saying anything if you have nothing pleasant to say. But the unwillingness to speak up to prevent hurting another's feelings truly isn't about concealing your expression, which usually, I don't suggest. It's about avoiding unduly, imprudently, or brutally responding to a person who has acted in a manner that, in the moment, has made you uncomfortable. Number 3. If it might make you seem defensive, shuttered, or even belligerent. If someone is providing you with critical feedback, it may be vital to set your ego aside and objectively analyze the veracity of their opinion. In such instances, it's far preferable to keep silent, listen carefully, and then provide a reaction. Whether in the end, you agree with their harsh judgment or not, it's still to your best advantage to open-mindedly analyze its veracity. While you may be unwilling to hear it, whatever they have to say could be beneficial. If you can't resist the urgent temptation to protect yourself, you may miss out on a good opportunity to learn something significant about yourself. Number 4. If it would simply significantly deepen someone's rage. When someone is much too wound up to listen reasonably to anything you may say, it's worse than worthless to react to them. Any reaction will undoubtedly be premature and serve only to make problems worse, because it's likely to be regarded as an interruption, as though you're not really listening or taking the individual seriously. In such cases, if there's to be any prospect of finally resolving the situation, it's necessary to devote all your attention to hearing someone out and giving them every chance to properly voice their complaints. Only then would they be receptive to hearing your competing opinion or interpretation. It's also crucial to prevent any knee-jerk, defensive reply that would undoubtedly further heighten the person's hatred. When you understand that the other person is plainly overreacting, the best thing to do is be present and attentive, look at them squarely, and pay completely attention to what they're so forcefully stating. That way, you'll maximize the probability that, feeling heard by you, they'll finally settle down. Then, and only then, does it sound right to convey your alternate position. Additionally, you may need to slow yourself down during this type of conflict. The individual may be saying things that feel not only exaggerated but also unfair and even abusive. Such self-soothing can assist you in reading between their heated lines and having a clearer understanding of how they may deep down have been wounded by anything you did or said. Not that you necessarily wanted to harm the individual, but what you did may have reminded them of some old incident that's still negatively charged for them. If on the other hand, you quickly react to them without knowing something of the dynamic underlying their verbal intensity, such a response may only aggravate the problem. Number 5. If it would simply fuel your rage. Following your urge to confront a person who has just offended you is only going to aggravate matters. Emotions, not just anger, but worry and depression, are best managed at moderate levels. When they start to become particularly prominent, your better judgment may be substantially damaged, and you might respond in ways you'll later regret. It is better to control your tongue and do whatever is necessary to calm yourself: deep, abdominal breathing, mindfulness meditation, gradual muscle relaxation, visualization, than to blindly pursue an instinct to revenge against the person who offended you. It's just hard to respond intelligently in these conditions when you're feeling so troubled that you're on the point of losing it. Carefully observe what's going on within you. Can you feel your face beginning to flush? Is your heart rate rising? Are your hands beginning to shiver or shake? Is your stomach fluttering like a butterfly? Or perhaps you're feeling a booming, whole-body energy surge. These are all indicators that your emotions are about to overcome your rational skills. Take a deep breath and strive to examine the reasonableness of what's going on between your ears. Number 6. If it would justify or lend credibility to some nasty person's disrespect of you. There's no compelling reason to reply to somebody whose major aim is to taunt you. When out of hatred or malice, another person stridently assaults what you said or wrote, replying to their verbal venom may give their comments the authority they barely deserve. The popular saying, "I won't dignify it with a response," applies here. Most third parties would realize that you avoided replying to someone else's statement not because their slander was righteous but because what they said scarcely required a response. Internet snipers, for example, may injure you only with your cooperation. Ironically, your strength in these instances derives from disregarding their verbal barbs. In most circumstances, you're in no way required to reply to hostile, non-constructive criticism. If somebody is pointlessly criticizing your reputation, it's ridiculous to attempt to defend yourself or to look down on them. The best method to settle the situation is by remaining quiet, which leaves you considerably less exposed to additional onslaughts. Number 7. If it might lead you to involve with an individual whose objective is to entangle you. When somebody lures you into an intractable verbal confrontation, it's generally because it provides them with the perverse joy of playing out their combative, argumentative predilections. Never quarrel with foolish people. They will drag you down to their level and then use experience to defeat you. If someone has previously coaxed you into replying to them and is pressing for a second round, it's best to cut your losses and call it quits, realizing that they're merely goading you to join in a continuous exercise in futility or folly. Such abuse is best disregarded, especially if they're merely participating in mudslinging to feed fantasies of being stronger or better than others. Number 8. If it might reinforce behavior that needs to change. To conclude in a completely different way, when young toddlers throw tantrums, this is their method of seeking attention or manipulating a situation to get their way. With rare exceptions, it's often advisable not to react to such uncontrolled conduct but tactically to disregard it, especially since an engaged response could unwittingly enhance the tendency. Children need to learn how to deal with the unavoidable stresses of life. If their acting out of control yanks your chain to the point that you defer to them, you are really teaching them to act that way to optimize the likelihood that they'll get what they want. And that's hardly in your or their best interests. Well, that is all for the video. If you find it helpful, consider subscribing and sharing it with your friends.